Hello and welcome to the Learning PHP chapter of our WordPress Development for Beginners series. In the article, we had a look at what PHP is, how you can use it. We looked at variables, statements, functions, and so on. In this video, I thought I'd take a look at an example of what you can do with PHP, and it will give you a little bit of a glimpse into how WordPress works as well. So let's get started. I created an HTML5 template for myself right here. And I made it from a template by HTML5 up. And it's basically a very small blog with 2 posts. You can look at both posts here. Here's post 1, and here's post 2. And to show you why and how people use PHP, I thought I'd look at the shortcomings of this setup first because it will make it pretty obvious. So if you look at the files for this blog here, you can see that we have an index.html, post 1, and a post 2. This would be index.html, and then post 1 and post 2 are these posts respectively. So everything's fine. If you go into this post, it displays very well. Then you go back and you have the second post. Now what I've noticed is that there's no button to actually go back to the main page. Nothing is clickable. This just comes back to this page. So let's fix that by making this image link back to the front page. So here we are on post 2. There we go. Let's find that image. It's this one here. So let's make that link back to index.html. So that will work just fine. But then if you go to post 1, it doesn't work because this is all in separate files. So I need to go to post 1 and make the link back to the front page there as well. And similarly, if I create any other page, and indeed even on this index page, this doesn't link back to the index page, at least the link doesn't point there. So I would need to change it here as well. Now, as you can imagine, this can get a bit unwieldy if you have 5,000 posts. You don't want to go through 5,000 files changing each link. So ideally, you would want to change it in one place and then never think about it again. So what WordPress does and many other CMS systems is they use template files, and they use PHP's include system and other systems to make sure that they only need to change things in one place. So here's how that works. What you can do is let's change all these to PHP because this is running on an Apache server. There we go. We would need to change all the links to PHP as well. Again, you can see how this gets very tiresome and very error prone as well. So now everything is processed by PHP. There we go. And it seems that I made a mistake. Oh yes, of course, because the post links also need to be changed. So on the index.php file, we need to change this and this to PHP. There we go. Perfect. So what you can do with PHP is separate out parts of your blog or your website. You can see that this left-hand side thing is the same for all pages. So ideally, we would want to separate this out and load this sidebar separately for each page. So let's see. Let's do that on index.php. What I would do here is create a header.php and a footer.php. I would take a look at the index.php and find where the sidebar thing begins and where it ends. So here's the top, here's the header. So here, it begins here, and the main part is this white part that begins here. So I would take everything from here on up, delete it, and add it to the header file. Perfect. Then I would find where this main section ends. You can see that there's a little beginning comment here. Perhaps there's also an ending comment. So let's search for main. Well, there isn't, but I think it's this ending div. You can see it underlined here. And you can see it underlined here. So it's where the footer begins. So we'll leave this untouched because this is the content of the index.php file. And everything after that will also be common to each website, each page, which would be this footer thing on the bottom. So let's copy out everything from here on down and then add it to the footer.php. So what we'll now do is then include these files into their place. So include header.php, include footer.php. There we go. Now if I go back to this page here, you should see no difference. The reason is it's basic substitution, so pull in everything inside the header file into here. So just copy paste this, take the place of this, so it's basically the same thing that we had before. This also allows you to do some better indentation, by the way, because everything is now in one. There we go. And the same goes for the footer.php. Now what we could also do, or what we should do, is do the same thing for our post1, post2 files. I renamed this incorrectly. So let's include the header on post1. Header, here we go. And we'll include the footer here. And then post2, same thing. Include the header and include the footer. There we go. So now we can still switch from post to post. There we go. And we can also go back to the main site. Now the cool thing is that if I change anything now in this header file, it will be changed for all files. So let's go into the header file and say Daniel's website instead of Daniel's blog. So now on the main page it says Daniel's website, and if I go to any post, it remains Daniel's website because every post takes this section from the same place. So there's no duplication. The code is only in one place. This is one of the best things about PHP. There's no code duplication. All right, so once we're done with that, let's see if we can even minimize this post1 and post2 so we don't need to create one file for each of our posts. Now what WordPress does is a bit more complex, but I'll try and create a basic version here. So let's go to our websites file and websites folder and create something called postdata.php. This will be a simple PHP file, well, no output. And what we'll do is we'll create an array, and we'll say that each member of an array is a post. So this will be post 0, and this is also an array, and it contains a title, it contains an excerpt. Well, actually we can make a function for that, so let's just say content. And I think that's it for now. It'll be super simple. Right, so we have two posts. This is post 0, and then we have post 1. Okay, let's go to post 1. The title is My Amazing Blog Post. There we go. And the post number 2 is a little Futurama. There we go. And now we'll add the content. This will make it a bit difficult to read. Don't worry about it for now. There are techniques to make this better. There we go. So this is the content of post 1. Then the content of post 2 starts from here and continues right down until here. Also, yep, if there are any, you'll need to escape all these. Since I've opened with single quote, I can't use single quotes within the string. I should either use double quotes, which doesn't make sense here, or escape it using a backslash. So I'll just find all of them manually. Again, there are better ways to do this, but for now, this will do. Wow, there are a lot of quotes here. Okay, I should have done a search and replace, but never mind. Okay, we'll do a search and replace. So I'll just undo everything. There we go. And I'll highlight this right here. Everything in between this and this. And I'll just replace this with this. There we go. Whoops, I forgot to tell it to use only the highlighted section. There we go, only in selection. Place all, there we go. So that's all better now. And we have an array of posts, which is only 2 for now. So first of all, what we can do is we can delete all this code here. So what I usually do is, now what we're going to do is, instead of writing 2 separate code blocks to display our 2 separate posts, we'll write one loop, which will go through our posts array and it will display each one. What I like to do here is, basically what we'll have is a loop which loops through our posts and then displays this code. We won't need the second one, so let's just delete that. Actually, sorry, it's not this code. It is. So there we go. So we're going to loop through something for each something. Don't worry about it just yet. It doesn't need to be correct right now. And the end for each will be here. Now, what do we need to loop through? Our posts array. Since our posts array is in a separate file, let's include that file here. Postdata.php. And the name of the array is post. Let's name that posts. There we go. And then we'll loop through posts as post. Go. And the title of the post goes here. And the content goes in right in here. There we go. Now this won't be correct just yet, because we don't actually need the title here. Sorry, we don't actually need the content here. We need an excerpt. So this should now actually work. Sorry, this was an error. There we go. There we go, but it shows the whole content, and all we actually need is an excerpt. So what we're going to do is write a function to make that happen. Instead of outputting the content, what we'll do is we'll create a get excerpt function, which will take this content and shorten it down to, say, something like 1 paragraph. We could do paragraphs, or we could just do a number of characters. Let's see how many characters this is. There we go. It's 109 characters. Oh, whoops, sorry, no. There we go. It's 460 characters, so let's go with something like 450. Like this. So we'll make it 450. There we go. So now let's write that function. We can write it anywhere we'd like, but I will actually include a functions.php file, which will contain all my functions. So we need to define a get excerpt function. It will take some content and then shorten it down to some length. What I'll do is I'll give this a initial value, which will be, let's say, we don't need that, which will be 450. So if I don't pass a length, then the basic length will be 450. So we can actually omit that. Let's go back to our index file. Let's just omit that. And if we need a different excerpt somewhere else, we can just use it if we want to. So what we want to do is, we first shorten it down to 450. So let's say our excerpt, actually let's check the length of the content. So if the length of the content is lower than our actual length, then let's just return the content. So if this would be the case, this function would just return the content, that just basically exit out. If the length of the content is larger than the length, then we move on. So we say that excerpt equals content and a length. So this will cut down the excerpt to 450. Sorry. And then we just return the excerpt. There we go, that didn't work. So let's see what we did wrong. Return the excerpt, index. Get excerpt. It should work. So there we go. Oh, I did it incorrectly, didn't I? Sorry, I haven't used this function for a while. It should be 0 length. There we go. There we go. All right, so now you can see this works. It goes from the character 0 of the content to character length, which would be 450, and then just outputs that. Now you can see that this isn't quite what we want because this H1 remains an H1. What we would ideally want is to strip all the tags and make it just one length or one block of text. We can do that with the strip tags function. So we can say excerpt equals strip tags. Excerpt. So this will remove all the paragraph tags. It will remove all the headings and just make it one block of text. However, this strips all the paragraph text, so it doesn't have the opening and closing paragraph that we actually do want on this paragraph. So we can remedy that by finding our excerpt and making sure that we wrap it in p tags. There we go. Oops. There we are. So that looks better now. Okay, so we have our loop going and we have our excerpts now. So this is actually pretty cool. What we can do now is go to our post data, and then just add another post. So what we would do is add a post here. And then we could add a little content. There we go, and this would also test our excerpt function. So we now have 3, and then we just have the content returned. This is fine, we have 3 posts. All right, so one other thing we need to do is make sure that they have proper URLs, because we also want to auto-generate this post page here, because now we have post 1, but this is also post 1. The reason is that since we are using our loop, this post1.php is now just coded in. So what we'll do is just create one file, post.php, which will handle all our posts. Right now we don't have this file yet, so let's just duplicate our index page and make it post.php. Now if I go to that post.php, you should see no difference yet, but it's a different file, so we can start creating changes within our main content here. So our main content is this one. So let's remove this for each. And basically what we need is the same kind of code over here, but we want the actual content and the actual title of the post. We don't need this link. There we go. So actual post, actual title, there we go. Actual title, actual content. Now, how do we do that? We don't really have any information about our post just yet because we don't know what post you want to view. But we can pass that on with the URL. So instead of using just post.php, what we can do is append this little post ID URL string and then pass it the ID of the post. So we can just pass the, if you look at the post data here, we have these little integers, which just small numbers that increment one by one. You can make this anything you want. You can give it an ID of 36 or whatever you would like, but let's just make this auto-incrementing. There we go. And let's just pass this number. So what we could do is instead of for each post as post, for each post as ID post. So this would be the little number at the beginning of the array, which is the array key, and this would be the array value, which is the array of post data. So let's echo out that ID here. There we are. Now you can see the link says post ID 0, post ID 1, and post ID 2. So let's go to post ID 1. All right, so that's a lot better. On the post page, we actually know what ID post, the ID of the post that we want, and we do have all the post data. So right before we start everything, we can say that the post is actually posts, oops, sorry, get, sorry about that, get, I think it was post ID. There we go. That should be it. Let's see if there are any errors. There we go. If you echo that out, if you print it out, you should get the data of that post. Yep, you can't really see it because it's hidden behind this little section here, but don't worry, it's there. We can also just echo it out here and then we will actually see it. That's better. So, yep, we have the correct post. So now all we need to do is substitute the values here with echo post title, and then make sure that the content goes here. Now I'm removing the p tags because the content actually has all the tags that we need. There we go. Oh, look at that. Undefined variable post. Yep, I forgot to leave this thing here. Post equals posts get post ID. There we go. Should all be better now. There we go. So we have this post, and now post 0 should also work. My amazing blog post, and post 3 should also work. So with a little magic, what we've done is we can create a post here, and it will essentially automatically create a post in our index, and it will also create a single post view. All right, so let's delete that third post rather. There we go, and we have two nice little posts here. All right, one more thing we can do, and again, so this is, before I move on actually, this is kind of how WordPress works. Not really, but kind of. This file here, this post file, this would be something like a WordPress post template or page template. This would actually be single.php into WordPress theme hierarchy. It's a page for displaying single posts. The difference is that WordPress, of course, doesn't have a big array of posts which you need to create. It has a database, and you enter the post data through a UI in the backend, and it stores all this in the database. And then through some automatically created functions, it pulls in all this data when you actually load a page. So this data is available, but not quite in a file like you see here. But the way it works is very much the same. So moving on, what you can also do is customize this whole template. So what if someone else would want to use the template, not myself? You could add your own name here, you could add your own icons and so on. And what you could do is you could go to the header and the footer file. Let's just close all other files. You could go to the header and the footer file and check out what you need to change, like your avatar and so on. Or you could actually create a settings file, and just pull in everything from there. So let's see, index. Now, one other thing you might want to note is that we're pulling all these files in our index file, and also we don't need these post 1 and post 2 anymore. Just delete them. Yep. And also, we're also pulling it in our post.php file. This isn't ideal. You would probably want to create a different structure for it, but it will do for now. So header, what you could actually do is, if we're pulling in the header anyway, let's just pull these from inside the header, and then we don't need to change them for each file. There we go. That should work. There we go. That's a little bit better. There's less code duplication, which is the point. So here, you can also create a settings file. Which would hold a few basic settings. So it could hold things like name, Pataki. Let's see, what else do we have here? We could actually hold this whole thing. Actually, my name doesn't really appear anywhere, does it? So we could just say intro, and then we could copy this in there. There we go. And we could use all the tags as well to make this nicer. So let's see how it works in the header. There we go. So there we go. So we would actually copy this whole thing inside here. So this is our intro. Now we'll need to escape all these things. There we go, that seems fine for now. So we have an intro, and then I have some links in the footer here. So what you could do here is, let's do some advanced array stuff, is I could have a setting for Twitter, I could have a setting for GitHub, I could have a setting for Instagram, but what if you have other social sites? So what you can see here is the way to create good PHP loops is to search for patterns. So you can see here that all these links are exactly the same, except this thing is different here, the link is different here, and then this little string here after the FA is different. So what you would do is you would loop through something, don't worry about what that is for now, and there would be an end of that loop. There we go. Then inside this loop we would have a little link here, and then it would have a URL. So let's call this social sites. Since we already know that our settings will be held inside a settings array, let's actually start like that, and in our settings we'll have a social array. I'm just planning this out now, so it could be anything, but I think it will be called social, and then we'll just loop through all of them and call them social, or we'll call them links actually. There we go. So here I would need the URL. So let's plan to call that links. I'm sorry, it would be link, wouldn't it? Links isn't incorrect, it's just semantically a bit weird. URL. This would be the name of the icon, and this would be the name of the service. So let's just call this text. Right, so I think we have everything we need. So now all we need to do is create an array which will generate this exactly for me once I'm done. So I'll just copy paste this out here, paste it back in here. And I mentioned that I would like to call this social, which will be an array which should contain, each one should contain. So here are my links, each one will contain URL, text, and icon. There we go, and I have 3 of these. I'll generate them. Actually, I'll do it now. 1, 2, and 3. So I have Twitter. URL will be this. The text will be Twitter, and the icon will be Twitter as well. I'll tell you how I know that in a second. GitHub, well, I know it from here, but I'll tell you how I know if I want to add a new one. This will be GitHub, and the icon will be GitHub. And Instagram, and that's Instagram. There we go. So if everything works well, I should now see the same thing, but I don't. So let's see what's going on. These are actually pretty good exercises because we all make mistakes, and if you learn how to debug your mistakes, you'll actually be a much faster coder. So you can see that there's a little error here. Let's copy paste this in to see what it is. There's an unexpected little arrow on line 5 of our footer. So let's see what I did from there. Line 5 of our footer. So this should be as, shouldn't it? There we go. So here we are. Now, let's see if I want to add Facebook. I could go to my settings, create a new one, and name it Facebook. So 3. Doesn't matter what it is. Facebook, and this will be Facebook as well. There we go. So that was pretty easy. Now, the way I know what icons I can use is, it's pretty obvious for me, because I've used this before, is that in the footer here, it says FA-. And I know because Font Awesome is pretty well known that this is Font Awesome's basic way of adding an icon. So, and you could also tell by going to, I think it's probably in the footer, no, maybe in the header. Let's just search for it. Assets, fonts, there's Font Awesome. So Font Awesome is a little icon set, and what you can do is go to the icon section and just take a look at any icon that you want. So you could use this adjust icon, and you just copy paste the text that you see here. So if you want battery 3/4, you can just type FA battery 3/4. So if I want to use this icon, I can. There we go. All done. So you can just look at all the social icons they have and just use whichever ones you want. Search for Facebook. Whoops. Okay, it's not segmented into social icons, but you can find all the ones that you want. Like there's Last.fm here, there's LinkedIn here. Just give it a search and you'll find what you need. All right, so now we have our little settings done. I can use this settings intro instead of the actual hard-coded text that's in here. There we go. Now that's fine. All right, so now if someone else wants to use this template, all they need to do is replace the images/avatar image with their own, go to the settings and rewrite everything to make it their own, and everything will take its data from here. So they don't need to touch any other page. It will be updated on all pages. All right, so that almost concludes this tutorial. One quick thing I want to show you is how this isn't the best code. What you should be aware of is that some variables don't always have values. So if I go to this page, this is fine, but if I would leave out this, then it would give me an error because it's looking for get post ID, which doesn't exist. Also, what happens if there is a post ID, but it's something that doesn't exist in the array? That will also give us an error. So you need to build in some error checkings and make sure that whenever you use a variable, it always has a value. So there are a number of ways you could do this. What you could do is, first of all, I'll just show you this quick example and then you can use it for all the other instances of this. First of all, what we need to make sure is that if, empty. So this thing only happens if get post ID isn't empty. So this is a bit better because if it is empty, then we'll just see nothing instead of an error, which is, I guess it's better. Also, what happens if it does have a value, but that value doesn't exist in the array? We get another error. So we also need to make sure that this only happens if get post ID isn't empty, and if it does have a value, then that value is contained within the post array. So we can do that by and. You should use that instead of and. You can use and, or you can use this, but you should probably always use this. And in array get post ID is in the post array. That should be better because we should get an empty. There we go. So now we've avoided the errors, but we don't really have anything else to show. So let's say if it isn't empty and it is contained within the array, then we'll show this. Otherwise, we'll show something else. Let's just copy paste this. Header, we'll say no posts found. You can also create a 404, but this is easier. Sorry. You've arrived at a page without posts. Try going back to the main page. There we go. Very eloquent. There we go, that should work. So, this is a good way to actually avoid errors. There are a lot of different ways you could go about doing this. This is one of the simplest ones, and it will work just fine for our purposes. So basically, we've actually created a little block solution for ourselves within, I don't know how long it was, but within 20 minutes or so. If you're well versed in PHP, you can probably do this in 5-6 minutes for yourself. So as you can see, PHP is a very powerful language. It is the basis of WordPress. And while this isn't exactly code-wise how WordPress works, the functionality and the way the thinking is very much the same. All right, I hope you've enjoyed that. If you have any questions, let us know.